Okay, given the fact that we have 1 hour and, out of respect for everybody's time, folks will continue to join us, but we'll go ahead and start. Welcome everyone again, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dr. Akram Khatir. I am the director of the Khairallah Center for Lebanese Diaspora Study here at North Carolina State University, which is located in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am delighted to welcome you to today's interactive workshop, Your Family, Your History. It is presented in partnership with the World Lebanese Cultural Union, and I'm delighted that Faris Wahbi and Bassem Dawar are both here joining us from that. And joining me as well this afternoon is Ms. Lauren Weiss. She's our communications manager at the Khairallah Center, who will be helping manage the technical side of the webinar and assisting participants throughout the session. Just a quick overview. Today's webinar is an introduction to family history. So some of the material we'll cover will seem to you as if you've done it before. I know some of you are experienced genealogists and family historians, so some of the stuff may be really kind of rudimentary, but for others it may not be. And we consider it a gateway to our more advanced workshops that we will be offering subsequently. It is designed to be practical, interactive, and as much hands-on as possible given the medium we are all living in. Together we'll explore why Lebanese American history matters, how to preserve things like family photos and documents, and how to begin recording oral histories, and then how to think about protecting family archives for future generations, which is really one of the key elements in all of this. We encourage participation throughout this session. If you have a question, you may either use the raise hand feature, or better, type your question in the chat, and Lauren will make sure we address as many questions as possible during the webinar. We are very glad that you are here, and we hope you leave today's session feeling inspired and empowered to begin preserving and sharing your own family history. I'm going to shift a little bit to sharing my screen so you can see the slideshow that we have. First of all, let me get confirmation. Can everybody see the slideshow? All right. Thank you, Patrice. All right. So the first thing I would like to ask of all of you is, what is the oldest thing you have from your family? And again, you can put it in the chat or you can raise your hand, whatever you want. It's a question that I'm kind of trying to elicit a response. Is it a photo? Is it a letter, a passport, a Bible, a Quran, immigration papers, story, recipe? What is it that is the oldest thing you have from your family, and why do you care so much about it? So we have, as you can all see from the chat, which is the other reason we did this as a meeting rather than a webinar, so you can all see it. We have photos. We have family history document from the 1700s, amazing. A key to our home in Palestine, that is precious. Copy of grandfather and father's passport photo, 1922. I would love to see that. And a list of families or genealogies from towns that go back all the way. Masbaha, for those of you who don't know what that is, sometimes we call it a rosary in English, but it's prayer beads, and U.S. Census records, which is great. And a family, again, much more about photos and, variety of these things. So it's clear that we all have a variety of these matters. Now, one of the things that I would like to emphasize here is, and I love the family trees. Those are very beautiful and works of art, really, in many ways. Everything we're going to be talking about today, everything that you mentioned and that you may be thinking about, we are going to be talking about how do we keep these things, these precious things, from disappearing. And that's really what the whole premise of this is, that how do we keep these things from disappearing? Things that matter to you, things that speak to your heart, speak to your mind, and speak to your whole family. So, but before we do that practical stuff, there's a bigger question that we must always ask ourselves. Why does Lebanese American history matter? Far too often, I must say, by the way, just for my own background, I'm trained as a historian of the Middle East. I've been working as a historian in the Middle East since the early 1990s, so I've been in the field for a long time. Like most historians, I've published my good share of articles and scholarly books and what have you. But far too often, what we find is that people think about history as about great ideas and great men / sometimes women. And we forget that in many ways, history is really about regular people, Yeah, of course. Great ideas and great individuals who have accomplished wonderful things, whether it's Einstein or Beethoven or, Marie Curie. Those are all important characters. We learn from them. They become role models. But really, the very kind of day to day, the real sinew of history comes from families, from the stories of individuals and families and communities. And in many ways, when we're looking about Lebanese Americans, we really are looking about these incredibly uh, amazing characters. These people who have traveled thousands of miles, right? Whether they traveled yesterday or they traveled on a steamship in the 19th century, they traveled, they left loved ones, they left things that they are comfortable with. Sometimes they went back once or twice or frequently. Other times they never went back. And their story is a saga. And it's an amazing saga because everywhere they went, they had a huge impact, whether it is at the level of their own lives, their family lives, the community they're in, or even much bigger at the level of the nation. So this kind of hierarchy or scaffolding, if you will, makes it that, whether it's a photo or a letter or something of the sort, these things become part of a larger story that we have to tell. But there's something else about why it matters. It's not only about preserving them, but because the history of anything, whether it's Lebanon or the United States or Argentina or Brazil, in case you're from there, would not be complete without the story of these people who came, worked hard, and built the very communities that make these entities what they are. We cannot understand Lebanon at any stage of its history without understanding its immigrants and the role they played in shaping Lebanon. And it's not just about sending back money, it's about exchange of ideas, it's about building institutions, and it's about shaping the very values of what we understand as Lebanon. There is a symbiotic relationship between immigrants and their home country, in this case Lebanon, and the country that they come to reside in, whether briefly or for long periods of time. So these things matter because they are existential. They define who we are. If we do not preserve this, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but if we don't preserve this, we lose a sense of our identity, of who we are, and what we've accomplished. Because really, we do not study the past just to indulge in some sort of hobby. We study the past because it's the only thing that makes us understand who we are now and allow us to imagine what we will be in the future. It's a very critical aspect of this. And Lebanese American history is not different than that. And I'll just give you a brief example, a very brief example. So a gentleman wrote a while ago, and he had 86 letters from his great-grandfather from Shreveport, Louisiana. They're in Arabic, handwritten, and he could not access them. Fortunately, we have a new AI program, I will talk about it briefly later, that allows us to take handwritten Arabic and transcribe it into digital text and translate it. Within half an hour, I was able to send him translations of each letter. Now, on one hand, he calls me back 2 hours later crying because for the first time he can access those memories. And he can understand certain events in the life of his own life that he never understood before because he read the letters. But on a much larger scale, when I read those letters, I realized how important they are. It was a treasure trove because for the first time, it was all, by the way, about a legal case about land in the village of Amshit, north of Jbeil in Lebanon. And that went all the way to the Ottoman Supreme Court. For the first time, we had this treasure trove that casts a very different light on the history of Ottoman legal system in Mount Lebanon. So whether at a personal or a scholarly level, these letters were invaluable. And that's why they matter. Now, if we don't preserve it, then the story of Lebanese America disappears. Let me go. Oh, before I go here, I want to go back. So I want to ask you another question here. And this is something that, oops, sorry. Oh, okay. Obviously, there we go. Before I go on here, so one thing I would like to know and hear from each of you possibly is, do you know the village or town where you come from in Lebanon? Again, you can use a chat. I'd love to hear where you come from. Ibn Sa'i, oh, I like that. Marjayun, I love Marjayun. Batroun, Abatur, Beirut. Yeah, all right, Basim. You probably have, originally, Basim, you came from other villages in Tain, which I love. Tibnin. I remember Tibnin, I grew up near it. I don't remember Diddi, because I've never been there. Karam Asfur, Jazin. Oh, Jazin is amazing. And Kfarshima, oh, that's close to where I actually, Biblos, Jbeil, oh, Sharbil, you're close to where my father is from. So again, and if we are to map, and we have done this, by the way, to map, at least for the early immigrants, where they came from, there's literally not a single place on the map that you do not see somebody sending people. I think my colleague Ghassan Haj, who's a professor of anthropology at Melbourne University, has talked about how within the Lebanese history, there's a DNA of migration. Not that we all want to grow up and migrate, but that there's not a single individual that has not had a family member or themselves leaving. So it's very much intertwined with the very history of Lebanon, and it's from everywhere and has shaped, as I said, the lives here. Now, in order to, let me close this a bit. In order for you to understand where I'm coming from, because some of you know me, some of you don't, I want to talk a little bit about the Khair Allah Center. And because in many ways, we are here to serve the very purpose of preserving Lebanese American history. We work with amazing organizations like the World Cultural Union or Lebanese Cultural Union because we want to work with communities and individuals to help them do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this video. It's a very short video. It's about a minute and a half, just to give you an overall vision of who we are, and then we'll go from there. Can you still see my screen or did it pause? You can see that? Okay. Uh, and so basically the center, just a brief history again, I don't want to bore you too much. The Khair Allah Center was established about 12 years ago. It's been established through an endowment by Dr. Moise Khair Allah, but subsequently has also added to the endowment. And our mission is very simple. We are here to help you. We are here to preserve the history of Lebanese immigrants in the world and to share their stories. So from the very beginning, one of the things we wanted to do that is not traditional archive is that we didn't want to just take things. We do not want to take things from anybody, including you. Rather, we want to help you protect it and share it. Because again, while it's really nice that we can have this stuff becomes even more meaningful when we share it and allow other people to access it, to hear the stories that we tell, because we enrich the community that way. And we really pretty much take everything that you can imagine that pertains to it. And our goal is that we preserve it. We have special collections. We have Vault where we save everything, the originals, and then we also digitize a lot of the material and make it accessible online. Always respecting the wishes of the record holder and donor who maintain the copyright. Because some of them say, look, I don't want anybody to see this for 50 years. Others say, go ahead, publish everything, including, the dirty laundry of our family. I don't care. So we work with each individual donor to respect and honor what their wishes might be. And so, in essence, I can go into a lot further detail, but it's really not what I want to do right here. So we really want to work with you individually and collectively to continue that work. Now, a lot of times people ask, it's like, what do I have? It doesn't matter. And, quite honestly, the list I give you here is just the beginning of the list. You can't, there are a lot of things that we will take that most people wouldn't know. And let me give you, for an instance, there's this amazing book written by an African American historian about a cotton sack. Now, you think for a moment, this is a cotton sack, a sack that they used to put cotton in it. But the sack was stitched from generation of women who were previously enslaved and then they're no longer enslaved of the family. So right on that sack, is a whole story that it tells. From the outside, it looks like it's not important. And far too often, a lot of us look at this material that we inherit, that we find in boxes in the attic, or somebody is just kind of left and we don't know what to do with it, and we don't understand the importance. And for those of you who are new to family history, my advice is very simple. If you have something that has been left to you before you get, destroy it, before you throw it out because you're trying to clean out great grandpa's home, take a look and let somebody else help you with this process. If you cannot read it because it's in Arabic, you can always, by the way, ask us for help or ask somebody who knows Arabic. It's very important to just be very careful with these things because you don't know the treasures that have been thrown out. I have heard way too many tragic stories about these materials that are so precious that people just couldn't quite grasp how important they are, not through their fault of their own, but simply because they have not really, they can't access them or they haven't been trained to think about them in many ways. All right, so let's move on from this and let's kind of talk about something very straightforward.
Take a minute to download.
All right, so the first skill that I would like to think about today, and many of you, again, already do this, but I want to get to the point where we do a little bit more, is how do we digitize photos and documents? Again, straightforward in many ways, and there are two elements that we can do here. One is you can use your phone, which amazingly, a simple phone like this has a camera that's such high resolution. It's really remarkable. It's not the most steady thing. When I'm taking photos, I'm terrible, so I wouldn't necessarily advise it as the best thing. So a lot of times there's flatbed scanners. There's a lot more specialized scanning equipment that's very expensive, some of them going up to the $100,000, but you don't really need that. You quite frankly do not need that. You just simply need some very, very basic elements about digital data and preserving it in digital data. And primarily you need natural light because you do not want any shadows to be cast on this. A lot of us who are used to Zoom now have these special lights. You can use them to shine, to create a flat light, but natural light works really well. You don't need it. You can scan the image or you can take the photo of the image. Okay? But most importantly, and this is where we begin to think as archivists, just because you took an image, a phone is going to tell you the date. It's going to give you what's called metadata. It's going to tell you the date and, generally speaking, the location and the time when you took this. But for your sake, you need to actually do something more important. You need to begin to think about filing system. So if you are beginning to do this for your family, you have to think, whether it's a digital filing system, how do I begin to create things so I can retrieve them? Far too often we think, okay, once I've taken the picture, I'm done. But in fact, that is just the beginning of a journey of how you go from an object to a digital image. That's actually, in many ways, the easiest and simplest thing is to scan. We do this like thousands of times on a regular basis. Far more importantly, it is capturing and creating a way in which you can retrieve them easily. Archiving is about retrieval as much as it is about preservation. So creating a naming structure, and you can have your own. It doesn't really matter how you do it. It's whatever you do it, as long as other people know your logic. And that way you can retrieve things very quickly. So, if you would like, some of you, we asked you to bring some object or something that you would like to do. Some of you have done this many times over, so maybe you don't want to do this again, but that's okay. You can take a time if you want to scan. If you don't know how to do these things, Lauren, did you have your hand up? I think you have Lauren? No? Okay. Let me look at the chat. Maybe I'm missing something here. Oh, you're still on the video slide. Okay. I thought everybody was. Oh. For some reason, it stopped sharing, and I'm going to go again. Can you guys see digitizing photos and documents? All right. Thank you, Lauren. So I was just saying, I'll go through the slide again. And you get to the point where you see a naming it. So generally speaking, there are two formats that we use a lot. What is called JPEG. And JPEG is you lose data. In other words, it's not giving you all the data that you want, but it's a manageable format. It's not large file sizes. So basically, if you look at the center image where it says, the Mount Lebanon Independent Government, it's in the middle with a photo that you can see that document there. That one will probably be maybe about 10 megabytes. If I was to use a TIFF format, it will be about 1 gigabytes. Now, we use at the center, we usually scan at TIFF because TIFF is called lossless format. That is, it collects all the data that is inherent in an image. And that is what's called preservation level, scanning. You want that TIFF because it provides a whole lot of data that JPEG does not provide. Because JPEG at its best, even when you say it's 100%, it does not retain all the information. And so what we do at the center is we scan at 100% at TIFF, and from there we generate, files that are JPEG. But the preservation file is always a TIFF file, a TIFF file. Sorry. And again, the one thing to keep also in mind about digital media, it's always changing. So some people think, oh, I've taken a picture of this 5 years ago. Believe me when I say two things happen. Digital media degrades, just like any media, and two, formats change. There used to be a format that Microsoft came up with when they first had it. It was an image format. Nobody's using that anymore. So one thing that we have to always keep in mind, and we do that at the center, is we have to be aware that as the formats change, we have to rescan things. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about digitizing photos and documents. All right. Now, we ask you to bring an object, something that you have. And this becomes a very important aspect of preservation. Again, far too often we just take an image and maybe write a few notes. But the image itself means nothing. It may mean something to you because you know a lot of things about it. But as an archival image, it means nothing without data. What is the story behind this image? What does it tell us? So for example, somebody offered us like 100 letters, 100 images. And they said, oh, I think somebody gave them to us. And we said, well, can you tell us who these people are? What are they doing? Anything. And unfortunately, they had no data associated with it. So it's nice, we preserve them, but really for historians, they mean nothing in the end. They tell us nothing about the moment because there's no context. And our job here at the center, and your job as a family historian, is to provide this issue. So we ask you to bring an object. So I would like you to take a moment now and write, who is this? Where was it created? When is it from? What time period? What language is it in, if it's a document? And why does it matter? And that is the most important aspect of things. Why does it matter? And I'll come back to this. But take a moment. Who, where, when, language, and why it matters. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think about the object if you brought an object. If you haven't, that's okay. We'll talk about it later. Okay. Does anybody have an object? A letter, a photo, material object, anything? Yes, Paul. You can unmute yourself, perhaps.
Should I use my phone? Can you see me?
I can see you, Paul. All right. We see this document. It looks like it has some Latin script and some Arabic script.
It's from a dry goods store that my grandmother and her future husband ran in Buffalo, New York. On the back, in my grandmother's English handwriting, says, "This is where he wants me next month, November 1908." And they were married in 1910. So this letter is explaining to her where he wants her to be to start their relationship.
Oh, I love that. Is the letter written in Arabic, Paul?
Yes,
Oh, I love
and it is with very neat Arabic, and it's the original.
That's beautiful. That is a treasure indeed. So, okay, so we have some information that's coming from it. So if we're asking the question, who are the persons involved? It would be your grandmother And
and
grandfather?
my grandfather Nicholas,
Okay.
whose anniversary of his death is today.
Oh, amazing. Well,
Yes,
thank you, Paul, for sharing.
1940.
And can you tell us where it was created? Was it Buffalo that he wrote it from?
Yes, Buffalo,
Okay.
New York.
And where was she when she got it?
Well, I know that she raised the family eventually in Niagara Falls, but I think she was in Boston. I can't tell from the letter
Okay.
unless it's in the letter.
All right. Well,
But she
perhaps.
was. I do have an address for her in Boston, in
Oh,
Roxbury,
well, there you go.
from an earlier, from another artifact.
And just kind of briefly, in your own mind, why does this letter matter to you, Paul? What does it?
Just for what you were saying, Aram, I want to know if this is a love letter. Wouldn't that be something? And what if it said "My Habibi" somewhere? Um, you know, or is it a letter with the touch of a patriarch that he was, telling her just what to do, um, or what mixture there is there?
Paul, you are a natural historian because you are asking us to think about the language not just as a flat thing, but language as this kind of really complex things that tell us about emotions, about state of mind, and about gender relations and about people's relations. I actually love how you've analyzed it. And the language does, this is what historians do. We read these letters. And by the way, I love these letters. We have hundreds of these letters. I've seen thousands of them in my own time. And that's exactly how Paul is reading it, is how we try to read it.
So I thank you for considering this. I'm sure other people have some stuff. I'm going to be, I have a PDF of this, and I'm going to be working with somebody to me a translation through the program that the AI translator that you're going to talk about later.
Yeah, we're happy to help in any way we can, by all means. And thank you so much, Paul, for sharing. That's great. Listen, a lot of times, by the way, what I love about history are the emotions, are because that's what makes us human beings. And a lot of times, these letters are so rich because they have all sorts of emotions in them, and we forget that our ancestors and even ourselves, if we are immigrants, we come with a lot of emotions. And in capturing them, we capture our humanity and who we are. Because far too often, by the way, I must say, we become stick figures in history, that are pushed around, but not really human beings that have agency and have emotions and have full range of human feelings. And those kind of laws are amazing. So what we do is to write a description. So it's not only that we scan something and give it a file name. We really, really want to go that step further and try to attach to it, not on it, hopefully, because we don't want to destroy the image, the original object, but try to give it some context. Because you and I will disappear at some point from this earth, and somebody may not know with loving care what Paul has just said to us, because he has followed this path as you will. So again, becomes very important. Now, uh, oops, again.
Aram, I have to show you just one more small thing.
Sure.
This is my grandfather's bone carved knife, utility knife. And I brought it out today because of the anniversary. That's enough said about it.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Okay. So one thing we capture the family history is through documents, through objects, as we talked about. But the other one that I find to be so amazing is oral history. And oral history, really briefly defined, is simply a recorded discussion of a person's experience, memories, and life story. And I want to emphasize the word discussion. Far too often we think about oral history as an interview. It is not. It should not be an interview. An oral history is a way in which you are having a conversation with somebody, and there are all sorts of ethics, especially when you are not related to that person, about how we do this. Because when somebody shares with us their story, we treat it as the most valuable thing. It's the most precious thing they have, their story. We hold it with a great deal of dignity and honor and preciousness, because for us, they are sharing with us something very dear. And so what we encourage you to do, especially, because a lot of times, you know, is to find, if you want to do oral history, is, oops, sorry again here, because is to find a quiet place. And our phones, again, are fantastic. They already have voice recorders in them. It used to be that you had to have a tape recorder, a reel-to-reel, or even some sort of professional digital recorder. Not anymore. What is also really remarkable, by the way, is today's audio recorders on your regular iPhone or Android phone, they can transcribe the interview. And I'm going to come back to that in a bit. The transcriptions are not always 100% accurate, so you have to be careful. But we'll come back to that a little bit. So find a quiet spot and collect a story. What we find very powerful is open-ended questions. It's not yes or no answers, because that really leads nowhere. Sometimes you will find that the person is a good storyteller. Other times they may not be. They may not be able, to perhaps express as much as you would like them to be. In all instances, we find that asking them not like, what year did you come here? Okay, those things are important. Fine, you do that. But asking them, for example, what is your favorite recipe that your grandmother made? Because what we find is that human recollection is so much triggered by smell and taste and sound. That's when memory becomes really keen. So the idea of asking somebody about their grandmother's recipe or grandfather's recipe, because there are quite a few people that cook, is to elicit from them a memory because they go back to that time. The second thing is, don't come in with any preconceived notion. Because again, they are giving you the story. Let them guide you where they want to guide you. It's their story. It may not be perfect. You may not get all the information you want. That's okay. Ideally, you have more than one session because you can listen and come back and maybe ask follow-up questions. But either way, always allow them to just guide you along their journey. Not because oral history is always accurate. In fact, a lot of times memory fails. For example, human witnesses are the most unreliable witnesses ever. But it doesn't matter. Because what matters is what they are recollecting. In other words, we don't regard oral history as an exact record. Yes, on Tuesday at 12 o'clock, this exactly happened. Yeah, sometimes some people really have that kind of memory. The great majority of us don't. It's mostly impressionistic. And those impressions are shaped by the stage of life they're in. They're shaped by their experiences. And in many ways, regardless of accuracy, factuality, or whatever, they're telling you something that tells you a lot about how their life has winded and turned and twisted. And that's what's so rich about oral history. We find that to be amazing. Plus, oral history is a way, because a lot of people, by the way, as I said earlier, destroy documents. So oral history is a way to recapture some of these elements over time. And we are working more and more intensely. There's a colleague of mine who's in the Bay Area who's working on this program that takes life histories and begins to create visualizations. Right? He's Lebanese, and using AI to create visualization of the story that's told. We are really beginning to experiment with a lot of things in which, and there's still a long way to go, trust me. And there are a lot of ethical questions. But for example, you already know that if you have a still photo, you can make it move nowadays. It's not that hard. You can give it an emotion. Is that valid? Is not valid? Is that messing around with memory? Those are important questions. But my point is, as we preserve more and more, the technology of the future, as you will see with some of the stuff we're doing here, will allow us to extract more and more data, if you will, out of this. So even a small snippet of a story is important. So I'd like you now to write one question that you wish you had asked an older relative. Just one question. And then if you can share it with us. So take a minute. All right. Anybody would like to share with us? What are their questions? I can't see everybody's hands, so by all means, just you can type it in the chat. Oh, good. We have some questions in the chat. Great. I assume you can all see the chat. I love Gustavo's questions. Gustavo, that's great. Gustavo and I have known each other before. We've met before, and Gustavo is undertaking a fantastic project in which his grandfather's publication he's bringing back to life, multilingually. He's based in Brazil. I think you're still in Brazil, Gustavo, or no, you moved? Okay. So if you look at Gustavo's question, it's a very profound question, actually. To say to somebody, what is left in Lebanon now that you are in Brazil, or now that you are in Buffalo, or now that you are in, Senegal and West Africa? And that's not a question about what you have left in terms of land, although that's important, or relatives, although that's important. That's again about a sense of who we are, because for all of us who immigrated or who have family immigrated, we change. We are changed by the experience. We live in this what some people call liminal space. We are neither fully Lebanese anymore, neither fully whatever it is we are living anymore. We're kind of in between this. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Sometimes it's hard, but a lot of times it's a very productive space because we bring in all sorts of interesting things into our lives that some of them fit, some of them don't together. So asking what is left in Lebanon is like, who are you as a person as you change over time, right? I'll give you a very quick example. I grew up with a father who was military, he was in the National Police at Derek, as we called it. And he always cut my hair very short, much shorter than my hair is today. So the first year I was in the United States, my only way of rebelling is I let my hair grow. In fact, I have a picture, I will not share it, in front of, the Statue of Liberty on purpose with an afro. I had a big head of hair, very curly. So I went to visit my sister who was in Senegal, living with her husband, who she married to. And when she saw me come off the plane with the big hair, she said, "Yay, Tatiri," she was so horrified. The first thing she did was to shave my hair because she recognized I'm no longer Lebanese and long hair. I mean, right? It's like the identity changes. We all change in simple and small ways. I really find that question to be very moving. Thank you, Gustavo, for sharing. Khalil, I wish I had asked more questions of my parents growing up. I know. I think it's so true. I have the same regrets. Unfortunately, my parents died within a year after I came to the United States, both of them, because of the war in Lebanon. But I wish I had asked those questions, and I really understand. But Khalil, I think there are ways in which you can get at some of these things, and this is where, relatives, other people, like I ask questions of my older siblings, because I left Lebanon when I was 17, and I really didn't know my parents as well as my older siblings. So you can ask questions there. If you have aunts, people can fill in the blank, and written records become very important. I just recently got, for example, my father's effort to write a history about our family, the Khalter family. I think most of the history was made up. My dad was quite a storyteller, but that doesn't actually matter to me. What matters to me is the marginalia where he scratched and where the way he was trying to build the story. So there are other ways you can get back and find an element of that. And Patrice, where was she born, your grandmother, Patrice?
She was born in Jrapta, which is a little village where Mar Yusuf is,
Oh, wow.
where Saint Rafka lived and is buried.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah.
I love that question. I love that question. We very rarely ever ask about children and migration. That's one of I find to be the biggest failing. We always think of immigrants as adults, but actually a good number of people immigrated when they were young. Sometimes on their own, sometimes they are 13-year-old kids going across the Atlantic on their own. Not today, we don't do it as much because of, border regulations and so on and so forth. But we still, even when families bring their kids, we don't think, how are they adjusting? What is this to them? And I think that question, is beautiful. I really love that question because, it's a different adult, migration is not the same for everybody. It is formed by gender, by age, by ability. Right? We think of people all being fully able as they migrate, but some people are not. And how was that experience, right? It's really a very different experience. So sometimes we flatten the experience, like everybody migrated is the same story. It's not. It's very different, right? One of my favorite stories was told to me by a man who lived in Greensboro, North Carolina. He and his brother owned a textile mill for a while. And he remembers migrating as a child, and he had diarrhea on board, and he would run around the ship, leaving a trail of whatever he had eaten. And I know it's kind of gross, but at the same time, it's so real, right? Because migration was very hard on the body and on the mind in many ways. Thank you so much for sharing all of these questions. I really like them very much here. So let me talk a little bit about how we can help with some of the work that you're doing. I mean, Paul alluded to earlier, one of the things we always are ready to help. Some of you are already incredibly well versed and advanced in the work you're doing, but we are still very happy to work with you in any way, form, or shape. So let me talk a little bit about some of the things. One of the things I always want to emphasize is it's great to have material, but where are you going to save it? How is it going to be preserved after you as a family historian or you as the only person interested in this, where's it going to go? Now, please do not misunderstand. I don't care where you put it. Of course, I would love to be, a place that you can entrust to provide. But to me, if you decide to put it at the local library where your family has been there for 3 generations and they have a special collections and archive, do so. Anywhere that you can trust to preserve it and hopefully share it is important. And this is what I would like to emphasize. You need to preserve your material, but you also need a way so it doesn't disappear. So, as I said, it's simple enough to take a photo, but that's not enough. We have to tell a story about it, right? But the third element is, how do people find the story? Now, you may not wish anybody to find the stories, and that's I respect. But what if you want those stories to remain alive? How do they find them? How does anybody access them? And by the way, that is the whole, in many ways, what we think about all the time. How do you discover what's called discoverability? Because when you accumulate data, and we'll call it data, it becomes this kind of mountain of material. How do people find this? And there are all sorts of ways, and I'm happy to talk about it. So one of the ways that we can help is we can house for you your material. We can help you digitize it, give it back to you, and keep a digital copy here. And we can work with individual families, again, to fully respect their wishes. If you want them to remain anonymous, completely off-site, private for X number of years, that's fine. We respect that. If not, that's fine too. We would love to work with that. 2, we are always, always, always interested in doing oral history interviews for us, right? We have, on average, 1 oral history interview a week. For us, that is a way for us to capture family histories from across the United States, but increasingly we are going into Central America and South America. In fact, our largest collection to date just came from Sao Paulo. And it's a man called Amin Ghraib, who had over 1,200 personal letters. He was a publisher of a journal called Al Haris, which we have digitized and we will be putting up on our newspaper database. And he had, amazingly, glass slides. They are just wow kind of material. Plus a lot of books that he published and so on and so forth. So we are increasingly expanding the geographies of our collection to West Africa, South America, Central America, and so on. And if you just need help, you don't want to donate, you don't want to give an oral interview, you just say, look, I need help. I need help to figure out, how to organize my material. I need help to try to understand what this material is. Like Paul was saying, we are always ready to help. You don't have to give us anything, but we can help in any way you want. Now, what I really also want to emphasize is this. You guys don't need to be scholars. Nobody needs to be a scholar. I think sometimes we think there's this kind of roadblock in which, the only people who can tell stories are scholars. Well, that's not true. I think if you are the family historian, you can tell stories. We can all tell stories. If you want us to engage with you in telling your family story, we're happy to do so. Because I really strongly believe it is not just about preserving, it's about sharing those stories in whatever form you can. I'll give you an example. About 6 years ago, a guy called me from Austin, Texas, because he was trying to sort of preserve some material. And he sent me some of the material. I read it, and it was about his father, who was not admitted into medical school in Texas because he was not white. So he got so mad, he picked up and went to AUB in Beirut and became a doctor there. This was during World War II. He comes back to Texas, and he spends his whole life trying to provide affordable health care to poor people on the margins of Texas society, especially on the border region, Spanish speaking, because he spoke Spanish fluently as well. So he sent this to me and he wanted to figure out how to preserve it. And I thought, this is an amazing story. So we made a documentary. right? And the documentary is about this guy, Herbert Nassour, the people's doctor, we called it. And if you are interested in telling those stories in whatever format you want, please, we're happy to work with you. We can, and nowadays, the ceiling of production has gone down. I mean, in other words, to produce an 8-minute, a 20-minute, a 30-minute documentary is a lot cheaper than it used to be. We can tell digital stories very easily. So there's a lot we can do. And trust me when I say this is not just about us as individuals. When we share those stories, it really allows other people to hear our voices, right? And I'll give you another example. When we started this whole project, it was based on a small pilot project to collect oral histories from Lebanese who live in North Carolina, whether they are descendants, third, fourth generation, or like me, just recently came from Lebanon. And we made a documentary called Cedars in the Pines. It was a 1-hour PBS documentary, 58 minutes and 30 seconds to be exact by PBS rules. And we showed it, thanks to my wife's commentary. I originally was going to show it at the university. Said, no. Show it at the North Carolina Museum of History. So we showed it there. And in good Lebanese and Lebanese American fashion, the fire marshal was pissed off because instead of 200 people, there were 300 people. And I can assure you that about half the people at the end of the film were crying. Not because the film was brilliant. The documentary is fine. It's a documentary. It was my first foray. Again, it's called Cedars in the Pines. You can watch it on our YouTube channel. But they were crying because for the first time, the stories they told around the kitchen table, on family vacations, in privacy, is now on a big screen in a place called North Carolina Museum of History. Our stories belong in the public space of America. And I think nothing could be more appropriate in this 250th anniversary of the United States than to say we have been here for 140 years. We have been here. We have built America. Not today, not yesterday. 140 years we have been working hard. We have, for better or worse, fought America's wars. We have walked its roads. We have worked in its factories. We have tilled its soil. And we have built its communities. We have worshipped in mosques and churches and sometimes synagogues. And we have been an integral part of this country. So what better way of saying all of this than to tell our story? And we're happy to work with you on that. All right. And again, you're welcome to contact me personally. Lauren can put my email so you can get that. You can go to our archive and it tells you how to donate material. At the same time, we like to give you resources. I don't have time to go through this because I also want to allow for questions and answers. But again, we will share these with you. But two things I would like to mention. You will see ArabicSearch.org and Fehris.org. Both of them are AI-driven projects. The first is about printed matter, newspapers, magazines, books, all the way from South America to Canada. And we are planning on, at this point, you can search this in Arabic, you can read it in Arabic. Come September, we are releasing a new version that will have over 600,000 pages, but more importantly, it will allow you to search in English or French or Spanish or Portuguese, and it will translate to you whatever it finds into English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. That's the point I was trying to make earlier. We work very hard to make sure that the material that is the possession of our community can be accessible by our community, even when many of our community no longer read Arabic. Second one, which says Fehris.org, is about handwritten Arabic. And currently it houses our collection, but we are working to make it open so that somebody sitting in Kansas can upload their great-grandmother's letters and get a translation of what she wrote. Very much like Paul is asking us to do. At this point, what I would say, if you have something like that, send it to us and we'll get you the translation. We haven't created a public portal. The last bit is the databases that we have created of various censuses. And if there's something that we don't have, we will help you try to find it. Now, we have a few minutes left, and I would like to say, a couple things, and then I'll open up to see if you have any concluding questions. So, it may appear sometimes that one story, one family story, is not big. But you put them together, they become Lebanese American history. And that's why we preserve these things. That's why we work so hard on this. So for this week, next week, I'd like you to do one thing, if you would. Digitize one item, if you haven't before. Write one description of this item. Ask one relative one question. And if you'd like, visit our website and see what you can find. The main thing is to create kind of a process. And we are happy to help you with that process. I'm going to stop here, and I am going to stop sharing and open up to any questions you might have. Thank you so much, by the way. Khalil, yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I don't know who the organizing committee is, and if you have, I mean, if they want to open up for the cultural hour, because I know within that they have a cultural hour, I'm happy to talk to them and see. We did that in Austin for the midwinter one, but we're happy to do it in Florida. All right, so any other questions, comments, we're happy to take them. Thank you, Gustavo. It was good to see you again. Bye.
I have a minor question, please.
Yes.
Thank you for the excellent presentation, but what is the basis of our contribution for only 140 years in the American history?
Because basically, I mean, look, people have been coming much earlier, but the first people that we have really seen in large numbers begin to arrive in the 1880s.
Okay.
Because before that, we have records of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10. But when we begin to see hundreds and thousands arriving, it is in the late 1880s. And basically, that's when we see steamship navigation becomes more common, which reduces the cost and the time it took to go from Beirut to Marseille, where they mostly went, and from Marseille either to North Cherbourg in the north, and from there to North America, or from Marseille to South America.
Why was there such a large influx at that time?
Because there was a Great Depression that was taking place in the late 1880s and 1890s, and in particular, Mount Lebanon, where the majority came from. Others came from what we know today as Palestine and Syria, but the majority came, I would say about 70% at least came from Mount Lebanon. But they were all part of the Ottoman Empire, and the majority came because the economy was taking a nosedive, partly because of the global depression I'm talking about, but specifically in Lebanon, the key element in the economy of Mount Lebanon in the 1860s all the way to the early 1900s was silk. Lebanon was a great source of producing silk thread, but unfortunately, the opening of the Suez Canal in the 1860s made sure that Chinese and Japanese silk flooded the market. And then Germany in the 1880s began to produce synthetic fiber, and tastes in general began to change. So all of these things combined greatly reduced the price of silk. And at the same time, there was an overpopulation in Mount Lebanon, partly because of advancement in vaccinations and healthcare. And so between those two forces, they began to look for ways to, to go out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ahlan wasahlan, Wafa. Sorry, Wafa asked this question. I'm curious how you balance making oral history family information accessible to the public while AI takes the data. Okay, that's a very good question. So, in many ways, the AI, of course, is constantly grabbing material possible. But our material, there are ways in which we can basically make it inaccessible. So our database is not easily accessible to AI, and in fact, we encode it in a way that because AI has crawlers going through the internet looking for new data. That's how it feeds itself, if you will, whether it's Gemini or Claude or OpenAI or Grok or whatever, a variety of these what's called large language models or generative AI. But you can put within your data embed code, which we do, that basically says you may not take this. This is copyrighted material. So that's how we protect it. Thank you for the question, Wafa. Yes, Paul.
I just wanted to have you tell us quickly upcoming events, not the details, but what we should be looking for and see in the newsletter.
Yeah, so at this point, this is an introductory one. We would like to do 2 additional webinars as part of the series that will be focused much more clearly. One will be on oral history, and the other would be a greater dive into preserving family documents. So those will be more intensive. The other thing that we are really hoping to do is we are contemplating at this point, because a lot of our community says this, we want to learn about the history of Lebanon. We don't know much about it. We're contemplating a series of very short podcasts that tell the story of Lebanon, so to speak, but most importantly, how it relates to our ancestors and why they came. Very much following up on the question that was asked earlier, why.
Is your forthcoming conference face to face for the area?
Not conference here, not in this area, but the other thing I would like to emphasize, if you guys would like us to come into your community in person and work with the community, we're happy to do that. So for example, we are going up to Cleveland, Ohio. We're working with the Maronite Church there, and we are a non-denominational secular institution. So we would work with anybody. So please don't think this is only to the Maronite community. Although I am Maronite by birth, my mother is Orthodox, and she never let a Maronite priest into our house. But we're going to there to run a webinar, to run a workshop for them, but also to collect stories from them. So we are more than happy to do that.
My
And
grandmother was Maronite, and she wouldn't let a Maronite priest in the house either.
yeah. And the funny thing is, my uncle was a Maronite priest, but that was a big family
And
scandal.
I was almost a Maronite priest.
Oh, well, there you go, Paul.
Yeah.
But I also would like, before I finish up, I want to thank Faris and Basim from the World Lebanese Culture Union. It's been a wonderful collaboration with them. It's been amazing to work with them. And as many of you may or may not know what the World Lebanese Culture Union does, but really it is the premier and the only organization that lives in 55 countries that tries to link the diasporas together for the benefit of the diaspora, for the benefit of Lebanon, and to create a conversation. And it's our privilege to be working with them at this point. So we will continue to work with them. We have a project that's going on in Dominican Republic, and we hope that we will continue to work with them in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I don't want to take up too much of your time. We're coming to the end of this. Paul, send us the material, and we will be happy to. And those of you who may have continuing questions, don't hesitate. We're here. Okay? You're not alone. We are here. We will work with you, and we thank you very much for taking the time with us today. You guys have a great